There are matches that get circled on a calendar months in advance, and then there are matches like this one, the kind that seemingly appear out of nowhere and suddenly become the only thing anyone in the tennis world wants to talk about. And if you are here because you typed some version of, "How do I watch this match?" into a search bar and stumbled onto this video instead, you are part of a much bigger story than you probably realize. Because right now, on the eve of a Wimbledon fourth round clash, there is a genuine wave of anticipation building around two names that, a month ago, most casual fans could not have picked out of a lineup, and by the time we are done here, you're going to understand exactly why that has changed, and why tomorrow, the 6th of July, is shaping up to be one of those rare afternoons on center court that people will still be talking about years from now. Because on one side of the net, you have a 21-year-old from the Philippines named Alex Eala, a player who, until a few days ago, was a name mostly known to hardcore tennis obsessives and stat nerds who track the WTA rankings for fun, and on the other side you have Jasmine Paolini, a 13 seed from Italy who has spent years being the player everyone respects but nobody quite fears, a grinder, a tactician, someone who wins matches by making her opponents feel like they are trying to run through wet sand. And when these two collide, you are not just getting a tennis match, you are getting a genuine collision of narratives, a young underdog riding the kind of momentum that only comes once in a career against a battle-hardened veteran who has seen every trick in the book and has counters for most of them. So let's actually rewind for a second, because to understand why this match has exploded into something people are desperate to watch, you have to go back just a few days to the third round, when Alex Eala walked onto center court as a 29 seed, given almost no realistic shot against the reigning Wimbledon champion, a genuine juggernaut of the sport whose defensive game and heavy topspin have quietly ground down opponent after opponent for years. And on paper, this was supposed to be a formality, a coronation of sorts for the champion on her way to defending her crown, except nobody told Eala that, because from the very first ball struck, she looked like a player who genuinely believed she belonged on that court, and grass, for all its history and prestige, is an equalizer in ways that other surfaces simply are not. The ball skids low, it moves fast, and if you cannot adjust your timing in real time, the surface will expose you brutally and quickly, and in the opening set, the champion did exactly what champions do. She broke serve early, she took a lead, and for a moment it looked like this would go exactly as expected, but then something shifted, Eala broke right back. And from that point on, she started doing something remarkable. She started taking the ball early, flat, aggressive, using her left-handed forehand to cut angles that seemed to catch her opponent flat-footed over and over again, and the set spiraled into an absolute nail-biter of a tiebreak, the kind where every single point feels like it carries the weight of the entire match. And at 9 points apiece, with the crowd holding its collective breath, Eala did something that takes nerves of absolute steel. She fought off 2 set points, composed herself, and on her fourth chance, watched her opponent's forehand sail just long, and just like that, she had the first set, 11 points to 9, and if you have ever played any competitive sport, you know exactly what a moment like that does to a player's belief in themselves. Because what happened next was almost unfair. Eala came out for the second set and looked like an entirely different competitor, more relaxed, more dangerous. She broke immediately, opening up a 4-game lead before her opponent could even find her footing, and even when the champion clawed one break back out of pure competitive pride, refusing to go down without some kind of fight, Eala simply broke again, setting up a finish that had absolutely everyone in that stadium leaning forward in their seats. Because serving for the biggest win of her career, Eala suddenly found herself facing 4 break points in a single game, for separate moments where the match could have completely unraveled, and she saved every single one. And then, on her third match point, she smacked a cross-court forehand winner that landed clean, dropped to her knees, and just like that, the defending champion was out, and a 21-year-old from the Philippines had just authored one of the most stunning upsets this tournament has seen in years. And here is what makes this even bigger than a single result. No player from the Philippines had ever reached the second week of a Grand Slam in the modern era of the sport. Not once. And suddenly there is a 21-year-old doing it on the biggest stage tennis has to offer. And the reaction back home was, from everything being reported, absolutely electric. Streets reportedly emptying out as people gathered around televisions and phones to watch a moment that felt genuinely historic. Tennis legends taking notice publicly, praising her fearlessness. And you have to sit with that for a second, because this is a country where tennis has always existed in the shadow of basketball and boxing, a sport people admired from a distance but never really saw themselves winning at. And here is a young woman single-handedly rewriting that story in real time, carrying not just her own ambitions onto that court, but the hopes of an entire nation that suddenly discovered it has a reason to care deeply about tennis, and that is an enormous weight to carry. More pressure than most 21-year-olds will ever have to deal with in their lives. But here is the thing about tennis, and about sports in general, the story does not pause to let you celebrate. because standing in her way now is a woman who has built an entire career out of being the person who ends fairy tales. Jasmine Paolini is not a flashy player. She is not the one making highlight reels with jaw-dropping winners every other point, but she is exactly the kind of opponent that makes life miserable for players who rely on rhythm and pace, because she has built her game around patience, footwork, and an almost stubborn refusal to give you anything easy. People tend to label her as a clay court specialist given her strong results on that surface earlier in the season, but she has quietly been proving all tournament that label does not tell the whole story anymore, because her run through the draw here on the grass has been genuinely impressive. She opened with a win over a dangerous American with a huge serve, someone who could have easily blasted her way past a lesser defender, but Paolini absorbed the pace and turned the match into exactly the kind of grinding contest that favors her. Then in the second round she got pushed into a tighter battle against a veteran opponent, the kind of match that comes down to who wants it more in the longer points, and she found a way through, and then in the third round, she delivered her most emphatic statement yet, dismantling a highly ranked and dangerous baseliner in barely over an hour, completely smothering her opponent's aggressive game plan and allowing her to win only a handful of games in the entire match. And if you watch closely, what stands out about Paolini on this surface is her footwork. She stays low, she never looks rushed. She has this uncanny ability to stay balanced on a surface that so often causes even elite players to slip and lose their footing. And she has this habit of essentially borrowing her opponent's own power and redirecting it right back at them, which brings us to why this particular matchup is so fascinating from a pure tennis strategy standpoint, because these two have actually played each other before, earlier this year, on hard courts in Dubai, and Eala won that one comfortably in straight sets, and in that match, her ability to dictate rallies with that dangerous left-handed spin gave Paolini fits all afternoon. The Italian struggled to find any rhythm. Her second serve got attacked relentlessly, and by the end of the match, Eala had won more than half the points played on that serve, which is a brutal number for any player to absorb. But here is where you have to pump the brakes on using that result as any kind of reliable predictor, because grass is an entirely different animal. The physics of how the ball behaves changes everything. Flat, penetrating shots that skid low become significantly more dangerous on the surface because there simply is not enough bounce for an opponent to comfortably get underneath the ball, and this plays directly into Eala's biggest strength. When she rips that forehand cross-court, it skids away from Paolini's two-handed backhand in a way that forces her to hit up on the ball just to keep it in play, which usually results in a short, weak reply that Eala can pounce on and finish at the net or with another aggressive ground stroke, and her serve out wide on the ad court. That classic lefty angle that gives so many right-handed opponents trouble becomes even nastier on Wimbledon's slick grass, where the ball can skid away from the returner almost unplayably. But do not make the mistake of thinking Paolini walks into this match without a plan, because if there is one thing her career has proven, it is that she studies her opponents relentlessly, and you can bet she and her team have gone over every second of that win over the defending champion with a fine-tooth comb. And her counter is not going to be to try and out-hit Eala. That would be playing directly into her opponent's hands. Instead, expect her to try and stretch every rally out as long as humanly possible, using heavy backhand slices to keep the ball skidding low, almost at ankle height, daring the younger player to generate her own pace from an uncomfortable position rather than simply redirecting borrowed power. And her return of serve is going to be absolutely critical here. If she can find a way to neutralize that first strike and drag the point back to something resembling neutral ground, her experience and stamina in long, grueling matches could genuinely tip things in her favor. Because make no mistake, Paolini is a fighter. In the truest sense, she scrambles, she defends, and she has this remarkable ability to flip from pure defense into a sudden aggressive strike with almost no warning, catching opponents off guard just when they think they have finally worn her down. And then there is the part of this equation that has nothing to do with forehands or backhands at all, the mental side of the game, because in professional tennis, there is a well-known phenomenon where the match immediately following a massive, career-defining upset can actually be the most dangerous one a player faces. The emotional high, the media attention, the sudden shift from being the scrappy underdog with nothing to lose to being the expected favorite carrying real weight. All of that can quietly drain a competitor before they even step onto the court, and Eala is going to have to find a way to reset her mind almost instantly, because she is walking into this one as the higher seeds equal in the public imagination now. No longer just a talented kid making noise, but a genuine threat expected to deliver, and that shift, from hunter to hunted, can mess with even the most experienced professionals, let alone someone barely into her 20s experiencing this level of spotlight for what might be the very first time in her career. Meanwhile, Paolini is almost perfectly built for this exact scenario. She thrives in situations where all the attention is pointed somewhere else. She has spent years being the steady, respected professional who quietly goes about her business while the headlines chase someone flashier. and she is not going to be intimidated by the aura surrounding her opponent's recent giant-slaying performance. She has been on tour long enough to know that every single match is its own separate battle, that reputations do not win points, and her game plan is going to be built on patience, discipline, and a refusal to be rattled by the moment. Now, before we get into the stakes of what is actually on the line here, it would be impossible to talk about this match without addressing something that has become an enormous part of how people actually experience major sporting events in this era, which is the absolutely chaotic world of unauthorized live streaming, because if you search for almost any high-profile sporting event these days, you are going to run into a flood of sketchy-looking links promising free access before they mysteriously vanish, and there is a very real reason. That phenomenon exists and keeps growing. Broadcasting rights for events like this one get sold for enormous sums of money to networks in different territories around the world, and that creates massive gaps in access. Entire regions where die-hard fans simply cannot legally watch a match involving a player who might be a genuine national hero, and when that happens, demand does not just disappear, it moves underground. Unofficial streams pop up moments before first serve, bounce between different hosting sites, and often get shut down mid-match once rights holders detect them, leaving frustrated viewers staring at a dead screen at the worst possible moment, and the sheer volume of people scrambling to find some way to watch a match like this one says something important. It tells you that stories like Eala's genuinely resonate far beyond the usual tennis audience, that people who might never watch a regular tour event are desperate to witness a moment of national pride unfolding live. And while none of that changes the fact that unauthorized streaming causes real financial harm to the sport and the people who invest in broadcasting it, it does highlight a genuine tension in how modern sports get distributed globally, a gap between where the passion for a moment exists and where legal access to it actually reaches, and that tension is not going away anytime soon. But let's bring the focus back to where it belongs, because regardless of how anyone ends up watching this, the stakes on the court itself are massive for both women. For Paolini, a win here would be a genuine career milestone, proof that her game translates far beyond the clay courts where she built her reputation, a statement that she belongs among the legitimate contenders on every single surface the sport has to offer. And for someone who has spent years grinding away without always getting the recognition flashier players receive, that kind of validation would mean everything. And for Eala, the implications are almost too big to fully process. A win here puts her into the quarterfinals of the tournament that so many players spend their entire careers dreaming about reaching. It would send her ranking soaring, opening doors to major tournaments that were previously out of reach, and it would cement her, not as a promising prospect anymore, but as an active, present force that the rest of the tour now has to genuinely account for. She would no longer be the surprise, she would be the standard everyone else is measured against, and when these two eventually walk out and take their positions on the baseline, all of this analysis, all of this history, all of the tactical breakdowns we have gone through, none of it is going to matter nearly as much as what actually happens point by point under the kind of pressure that only a stage like this one can create. Will Eala's flat, searing ground strokes continue finding the lines the way they did against the defending champion, rushing her opponent into the same kind of unforced errors that doomed a former champion just days earlier? Or will Paolini's relentless footwork, clever variation, and refusal to give away a single easy point slowly suffocate the momentum that has carried the young Filipina this far? This is precisely why sports capture our attention the way they do, because you can analyze every angle, study every previous meeting, break down every statistic, and still walk away with absolutely no certainty about what is going to happen once the ball actually gets tossed into the air for that first serve. And that uncertainty, that razor-thin line between triumph and heartbreak, is exactly what is going to make this such a must-watch encounter. So whatever you end up doing tomorrow, make sure you carve out time for this one. Because whether the ending brings a fairy tale continuation for a country falling in love with tennis for the first time, or a hard-fought lesson in experience triumphing over raw momentum, you're going to want to have seen it happen live rather than hearing about it secondhand. Thanks for sticking with this breakdown all the way through. Drop your prediction down below, and we will be back right after the match to break down exactly how it all went down.